Your evening. So welcome. So this is Woodbury University's virtual classroom. Yes, this is what we do now. I'm sure you're getting used to that.
Yeah.
And we're talking about influencer marketing, but these are all marketing and fashion marketing students. And I was just actually right when you came in, just talking about, it's actually a really great time to get into the industry because a lot of these students have been waiting for this pivot and all these changes to happen. And this is a great time for these new voices to come in where before it was always like business as usual. So with that being said, I was like, this would be great if I could have you come and maybe, because you've always kind of been in that path. You don't know this, but when you were at Forever 21, I literally wanted to find out who was behind it because I could see the change.
Oh, thank you.
In the whole digital format. I'm like, who is he? Who is this person? Because I need to find him. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of, honestly, I discovered you through the content you were pushing because it was very unique and I really liked the direction it was going. And then obviously kind of kept following you as time was going. And but I guess maybe what we could do, if you're okay, I know we were kind of, casual about this, but
sure.
Maybe just kind of starting, did you wake up and go, I can't wait to be a digital marketer, the head of marketing for H&M? I mean, how did you kind of start your path?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and first of all, thank you guys so much for taking the time to, dial in and listen. I appreciate it so much. To really kind of answer the question head on, I had no clue what I wanted to do in college. I went to Loyola Marymount University and studied communications and really had no kind of idea. And I got really introduced to my first internship with Guess Jeans, where I entered in the realm of internal communications and training and development. And I had always known that I loved communicating with people. I loved kind of finding out information. I was one of those that really felt like I was good at being a sponge. I absorbed things very well. Don't have the best long-term memory, but have the best short-term memory. So for me, I knew that there was something there that I just really enjoyed communicating with people and trying to figure out how to relay information. And I saw a ton of white space. I've always kind of been one of those individuals that, wanted to learn more and take on new challenges and not be afraid of them. So I actually started, I started my career journey the day Instagram actually launched. I put together a PowerPoint presentation to the founder and CEO of Guess, and I said, hey, I know how obsessed you are with advertising and things like that. You need to be putting all of these images into a Instagram page. So for me, it was very much like trying to be that go-getter mentality. There was no books on social media. There was nothing really kind of that existed beforehand. So everything was touch and go. I failed a ton of times throughout. And I think that's really kind of how I got started, is being so fascinated by something that all my friends were on, and people started posting a lot more and bloggers were becoming a thing. And now to see how it's kind of evolved, I just kind of naturally fell into it and, was curious and continued to grow. When paid social media came out, I obsessed over it and watched YouTube videos and taught myself how to do it because nobody in the organization knew how to do it. So I think from that's really skyrocketed my career. I have no problem saying this, but I'm 32 years old and have been able to move and work for some of the biggest companies around. And now for my dream job to work for H&M has been incredible. So I think I never intended to fall into digital marketing. It kind of just happened naturally. And I really made sure to pair kind of my skill sets with this new channel that I knew was constantly going to change and it was going to be a challenge. but it was something that I had such an interest in. I didn't want every single day to be the same type of day. So that's a long-winded way of really saying kind of how I got into it and what kept me going.
Yeah. So just out of curiosity, because obviously I love, and you talk to enough students and enough people asking advice, you know, you have more than one business card when you reach a certain point. Like for you right now, you're like, I feel good, but you know what? You, who knows where you're going? But the thing is, you have lots of different things in this amazing path that you're going on to kind of go where you are right now. But I was interested in, going back to the communication and marketing, like just out of curiosity, what are some of the things that kind of interest you? Like you know, do you like the visual? Do you like,
Yeah.
well, like what interests you about communication, and how did that tie to marketing?
Yeah, so really, really interesting that you bring that up, because I think what a lot of times people forget, like talking about social media, where I first started my career, is social media, there's so many different layers to it. There's the content creation side of it, there's influencer marketing, there's organic social media, there's community management, there's paid social media, there's the reporting side of it. So you kind of have to be this unicorn of left brain, right brain, and trying to figure out how, if I'm weak in one area, how do I surround myself with resources to kind of make up for that. So for me, I've always been fascinated by really strong creative and brand storytelling and visual imagery, but I knew I wasn't a good photographer. So I had to surround myself with photographers and, with creatives that could help lead that vision. I knew what I wanted. It was all up here, but to actually get that out in a creative way, I, sometimes needed help. So I took like flat lay courses to learn how to take product shots myself. And then at the same time too, partnered with influencers to generate content. And, back in the day at Forever 21, I was able to take them from 3 million followers to 12 million in such, in that 2-year time that I was there. And all of that was because I started to lean on user generated content, taking a look at, hey, I might not be the best creator in the world, but there's all these customers out here that are, and they're producing beautiful content. Why don't I get in touch with them and see if they'll allow me to repost? And that's really where the F21XMe kind of came out. And that's when like the birth of hashtags and brand partnerships started to happen. So I think for me, you kind of just have to go with what you're good at. And I've always been a big believer in following and honing in on that, not focusing too much on what you're not good at, because you can surround yourself with people that can help, fulfill that kind of void, if you will.
Right. So, I mean, yeah, you're talking about like, I remember those days, but I'm just thinking you're working for a big brand, and now how did you explain, well, we're going to use content that actual users created and we're going to use that?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, you're going to shoot it professionally? And
yeah.
How did that conversation go?
It was tough. I mean, I came from the days of where the CEO wanted to print out every single week of looking at exactly what was being posted and approving it or rejecting it. So like for them, traditional businesses have a very mindset of, we have to create everything and therefore it is ours and it has to look a certain way. And there's certain uncontrollable things, if you're posting a photo or a piece of content and you don't like the background of somebody else's photo, you can't really go and tell them, hey, Photoshop that out or reshoot on a different background. But I think what was really interesting is you went from an advertising age to where everything was super polished and refined and ready for print magazines and all of that, to a more authentic approach. So was it challenging? Absolutely. But now you start to see brands want more and more of that. They want you to shoot selfies at home, especially during quarantine and things like that. So I think that it was just such an interesting time. And for me, I've never been frustrated with the process, knowing that it is so new and getting into social media. You're always going to know more than your CEO or your boss in some capacity, because they'll understand how to do it from a personal standpoint of how me as Mario can post on my Instagram and what that looks like. But for a brand, it's entirely different. So there's always the worst part about social media is that everybody thinks they're a social media expert because they have a cell phone. So it really takes educating, your boss or those within the organization. Hey, okay, you may not like this, but let's test it and let the customer tell us what works and what doesn't. And 9 times out of 10, based on kind of you being in the insights and analytics, you typically prove them right, and then you can continue to do more of that. So to answer your question, it was never really easy. It was always a challenge because it constantly was educating others on how to build content, how to try different things out.
I think that, one of the things I want to get across to the students also is that with Woodbury University, we have we have marketing and fashion marketing. We're the only fashion marketing program within a school of business. It's kind of like a unique, which people still think we sew, and we have to convince them we don't sew. But we're really good at marketing, fashion. But I always say that we're good at, marketing creative industries.
Right.
Because like you said, like we like working with the colorist and the people draping and all the, like that's the exciting part, And with that being said, I know you went into the beauty industry.
Yeah.
And I just wondered, like, was that a big change, or was that, like, what was that like? Because,
Yeah, no, very, very good question. For me, it was a huge change. And I think, every industry is different. I very much value fast-paced environments. I've always liked new campaign launches. At H&M, we come out with about 56 campaigns every year. So you're talking about, a week and a half to 2 week bursts of just content, driving things as quickly as possible. In the beauty industry, it is very, very different. You typically have a product launch once a year, and it typically falls in January. So you have one product, and at L'Oreal Paris, I was in charge of hair color and hair care for social media. I was in charge of the influencer side of it, and then organic and paid. So when you're talking about, a campaign launch, it was like here's this, Elvive L'Oreal Paris shampoo, and this is what you have for the entire year. So how do you get super creative with coming up with content, leaning on influencers, producing video content, and having enough to talk about? And I think for me, the beauty industry has so much money. I've never had bigger budgets than I had when I worked at L'Oreal Paris.
Never heard these words.
I know, I'm like, budgets, what are these? But I was so fortunate because also too, the beauty industry was really, really far behind. You're seeing all of these up and coming brands and influencers create their own palettes, and these big brands like L'Oreal Paris were like, how do we even compete with this? This isn't even a format that we're used to. So for me, it was a challenge. And I think, it taught me a lot about how to do things at very large scale with huge impact, because if you found the right influencer in the beauty landscape and had them authentically talk about your product, you would see it fly off the roof at Target. So it's just I hate to say it this way, and I hope I don't offend anyone on the call, but it's very much like a cult. If you're like a beauty guru, you're obsessed with kind of these influencers and recreating that look and all of that. So I think the shift for me was quite hard because I had to change my mindset. I wouldn't say that I didn't enjoy it. I just preferred more of the fast-paced fashion side of things too. So I think there's pros and cons to each, but the thing that I love about social media is, and now I do some freelance work as well, you're constantly shifting your mindset as to, okay, this is a different industry that I'm used to, but the formula can still be a little bit the same or be tweaked, and how do you go about doing that? So that's why I find it really exciting.
I remember when you went to H&M and you were silent for a little bit, and then you announced you're at H&M, and I'm like, uh-oh, what's going on? I'm like, wait, Coachella's around the corner. What does he do? And you then went to the Retail Federation, and you did a lecture. And I loved what you did with the campaign. I loved how it was very organic. And you've been pushing diversity isn't like a new checklist you're going to have to add. I think H&M always had something like that, but it was definitely your footprint when you came, what you did. And I look at my class. I mean, we are diverse, okay?
Yeah.
So that's the real world. And I appreciate, which I'm sure they do too, that you were reflecting that in what you were pushing out. So could you maybe share with us kind of like, I don't know if you want to share about the campaign, your
sure,
anything about that, but just kind of maybe some of your vision and how, this is where we're hoping this pivot and what's happening and everything in the world right now.
Absolutely. 100%.
can do this. So
Yeah, no, 100%. I think for me, throughout my career, it's been very important to me as you start to go through all of these, various channels on focusing on representation. Because the cool part about social media is you didn't have to be a model and you didn't have to, be picture perfect by beauty standards in order to, have a platform and a voice. And I think that was something very important to me from my time at Forever 21 all the way through the beauty industry, all the way through, H&M. And I think that was something that I really brought to the table. I think H&M is a fantastic brand. I've been, a huge fan of them from back in the day. I remember when they had all of their like David Beckham drops and Alexander Wang collaborations. I was outside of the mall at like 4 o'clock in the morning waiting in line. So like, it
yeah,
was a dream of mine to work.
maybe that's where I saw you. I don't know.
Maybe that's where we first crossed paths. But I think for me, it was one of those things to where, I already knew what I was getting into with a powerhouse of a brand. But, with so much growing, and H&M was very much focused on, let's grow our footprint in the US. They are a global brand. We're in over 60 countries. So for us to have that kind of scale, but they've traditionally focused on kind of that model aspect of having models for campaigns. And, in a lot of ways, they were really behind in terms of these niche kind of up and coming brands. So and I don't know how many people, on the call know this, but H&M headquarters is actually based in Sweden. And, and a lot of times having that European mindset, it's sometimes hard to break out of that. So even though I, do marketing for H&M, I'm responsible for the US. So I, brought to the table bringing up, we still need to have campaign models. We still need to have imagery, asset, all of that. We still need to push for diversity and make sure that we challenge the status quo. It does become a little bit of a logistic challenge because a lot of times we do our shoots based out of Sweden. So you can understand that the pool of diversity is much larger in the US than it is in Sweden, but that's something internally that we have to figure out. But I think for me, what I wanted to bring to the table is when we talk about diversity, I didn't want it to just be a ethnicity conversation. I wanted it to be something that we're talking about abilities, disabilities, different skin types, even sexual orientation, like things that people don't talk about, and build an ambassador group of 20-ish individuals to say, these are people that represent our US customer, and these are people that we can stand behind as a brand. So what we did is we created an influencer program, launched it at Coachella, did the complete opposite of what you're supposed to do at Coachella. Is we didn't really go to parties. We just had our influencers at our own hotel. You couldn't get invited to it. It was just the 20 of us and their plus ones, like completely reworked the Coachella strategy to say, we're actually going to become a family and have like a family intimate gathering to get to know each other, understand the approaches, have conversations about where they want to see their content go, how we can help them as a brand, and then reintroduce them into the Coachella kind of landscape. So it was a really interesting approach, and it's not a one-off for me. Diversity has been something that's been in my blood, and representation is so important to me. So whenever we have local adaptations or we're able to challenge the status quo and come up with new ways to approach campaigns, we definitely do it. So when it became time to speak out about the Black Lives Matter movement and really talk about all of the horrible things that are going on within the US with injustice and police brutality and all that, it became a very symbiotic conversation between the US team, myself, and also our global counterparts. Because even though a European company may not fully understand what's happening in the US, that's kind of my responsibility. So that's something that I've enjoyed very much. H&M has had their hiccups in the past here and there. And I think like any brand, it's really important. There's two sides to every story, but I think the perception becomes the reality for a lot of customers. So it's our job as marketers to then try to figure out how can we do the best job in the world to make sure that when people see our campaigns, they think of themselves. And they see something that they can relate to. So obviously I have a lot of passion for it. I could go on and on about it, but I think that's something that is core to not only H&M, but core to myself. I'm fortunate enough to be in a position now to where, I could really choose to work for a lot of different companies within the fashion wheelhouse, but I choose to work with companies that align with my values. And I know that's a very privileged thing to say because I'm in a great position, But I think from my perspective, I want to do something that is going to drive impact and meaning versus, just working at a company because of their clout. Because I think a lot of times I could, you see a lot of marketers just go and do what's supposed to be done and come out with a campaign and execute on that. Every single year should feel different if you're a true marketer and you actually love it, because every single year is so different in terms of the customer mindset. So that's something I hold near and dear to my heart.
No, and I think that's when you did that campaign and you were at that hotel that I so wanted to find out where it was.
I'll send you a link.
That is how I knew it was you, because they trusted you, obviously, to bring you on board, and that you pulled people that I didn't know. A lot of those people, I was looking up, like, who's this? And I think that's the joy, I think, of social media, is discovering these kind of people that you can relate to, that you found them for us. You know what I mean? Right. Because there's a lot of people on social media. It's hard to find. So, exactly. And I guess the last thing, and then I'm going to open it up because I know there's some more questions. We have questions, but I know there's questions there. But I liked that you referred to influencers as your ambassadors. Mm-hmm. And I felt that, people keep saying, well, how many followers should they have for us to, use them, or what do you, and I loved your, well, I didn't get to see it, but I read about your lecture. And I love that you, instead of getting lots of different influencers, you really just kind of honed in on who the key ones were, and you referred to them as your ambassadors. And I think that's a different, way of looking at things, that I think we should all start looking at who we're, especially now, because, just because they look great in that outfit, they may not be saying the things that align with our brand.
Yep. No, 100%.
So
100%.
So can you tell us maybe just a little bit about like your vision or what you,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think we took the whole review process of coming up with the H&M League quite seriously. What I actually instilled within the team is we're treating these ambassadors as, influencers that are going to come on board with us, and we're essentially employing them for a year to produce content. Yes, they're not sitting with us at our desk jobs, but we're having ongoing conversations about what we expect from them, the stories that they want to tell, the stories that we want to tell, and making sure that it's an authentic approach. So what we actually did is, one of the girls on my team, her name's Megan. Megan was responsible for actually interviewing the influencers. It wasn't us just reaching out to them and telling them, congrats, you've got this influencer partnership. It was, before we move forward with this, we have a couple questions to ask you. What are your views on diversity and inclusion? What are your views on sustainability? What are your views on your content, and where do you want to grow as an individual? So when I really say it was an authentic approach, it really was. We got to know these influencers, understand where they wanted to go in their careers, how they're viewing their platform, what's important to them. And I think that is so important, because you need to know the people that you're working with and understand, especially if they're going to speak on behalf of your brand, that they know what's going on. They know what you stand for, so that, step away from the Instagram post for a second. When people ask them, hey, what do you think about like actually working with H&M? They have things of value to say, or they're proud of being a part of the program. So it took us 6 months. And to your earlier point, we didn't focus on follower counts whatsoever. It was great if we had the reach, but that was not what this was about. It was about being intentional and hiring, good people. And I think a lot of times people are so caught up in reach and impressions that they don't pay attention to what the goal is. And I think for me, it's what I really wanted to do is focus on the different tiers. And I could go on and on about this, but what I wanted to do is focus on the different tiers within influencers, because you have your micro influencers, your mid-tier influencers, and your top-tier influencers. And what we found is top-tier influencers, you're talking about 1 million to 6 million to beyond. Those are really your reach and impressions. You may not get a lot of sales from them, but you're going to get a lot of eyeballs on content. Everyone's going to know that so-and-so Rocky Barnes posted about this, and it's all over, and all of that might get picked up depending if it's a celebrity in media and things like that. Mid-tier are more of your conversion drivers. They drive high reach, but then at the same time too, they drive pretty good sales. And then when you're talking about a micro level, typically those influencers have a very geo-targeted reach. So based on if I'm I've only lived in LA and New York, and a majority of my following is both from LA and New York. So I have 24,000 followers on Instagram. So I would technically be considered a, micro influencer. So from that aspect, it's wrapping your head around how do I want to assemble kind of an ambassador crew of people that are top tier and then also micro, and have them have this experience together. And what we found is that the micro influencers, their channels skyrocketed. What H&M was able to do for them is some of them started out as having 20,000, and by the end of the year, they were at 150K. So it's just, we were very intentional with how we went about it, but the goal wasn't to have as many followers as possible, because then we wouldn't get the same level of quality, talent, and authenticity as what we wanted. So that's kind of how we looked at it.
That's great. That is wonderful. Thank you for that explanation.
Yeah, of course.
I'm like, yes.
Of course.
Well, I feel like I want to open it up because I know that some of the students had some questions.
Yeah.
And I know we have more questions, but I feel like they kind of cross over.
No,
so
of course.
I don't know if Rebecca or Ninar, if you guys wanted to jump in.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hi, how are you?
Hey.
I'm Nanar. So as marketers or like students in marketing, we're told to know our audience really well. And I feel like you know your audience really well, because whether it was your podcast or like TikTok, like you know exactly what we want. Do you use any kind of like data metrics to get like actionable insight, or like know what you need to do to capture our attention well?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that, and that's the interesting part about social media that so many people leave off, is the reporting and analytics side of things. There are tons of tools out there, but I think if you're interested in kind of a startup or doing it for yourself, honestly, what I do is I really just go into Instagram analytics and TikTok analytics every single day, and I take a look at, it sounds kind of obsessive, but what I do is I take a look at what's performing well, what are people engaging with the most. And on Instagram, you can sort it by like, what are people sharing the most? And some of the things that I, never realized people would save, they're saving, or quotes that I've said, or things like that. So a lot of times people only take a look at that once a month. And if you're doing that, you're not really kind of following the traction and what's changing and all of that. So for me, I'm a huge fan of TikTok right now, and the scale that that's been able to do. So I've really been very intentional. I've been testing and learning. Some things that I think are going to do well, don't do well. Some things that, I just do really quickly and put up, end up going super viral. So I think keeping your eye on kind of the back end. Yes, there are many other tools. Social Blade is one that a lot of people use to take a look at all of your analytics. But I think the best kind of approach is really going into Instagram analytics or TikTok or Facebook analytics yourself, and making sure that your profile, even if you don't have a business or are trying to take it that way, turning it into a professional account so that you can get those analytics. And I've, been tried to, so many people have tried to pitch to me different analytics tools, and we keep very bare bones analytics at H&M from that aspect, because we work more closely with the Instagram and Facebook analytics, because that's the direct kind of line of communication. So my advice is really just kind of constantly check and learn from the content mistakes that you're making, but also understand what's going viral and what people are saying, because I'm reading through every single comment to see what they're actually saying and what they liked in the video.
Hello, Mario.
Hi.
My name is Tatiana, and I had a question regarding the relationship between sustainability and marketing.
Yeah.
Being that sustainability is a huge core pillar for the H&M company, I wanted to see if sustainability had any sort of effect on marketing strategies, and what you've seen so far as head of marketing there.
100%. Really, really good question. And I'm glad that you asked that, because, for us there's a lot of conversation about sustainability in fast fashion, right? H&M and Forever 21 and all these Old Navy and all these fast fashion brands have a very negative connotation around them in terms of wear once and get rid of. Our hope is that we build quality content so that, or quality garments, that people don't feel that. And I think what we're always trying to do is push our sustainability efforts from not only the way that we design and source, but also how we communicate, also, you know, the platforms that we use. We talk about sustainability in a variety of different ways. But what for us, we really focus on is the materials that are sourced, the fair living wages, and really kind of focusing on that aspect. So since it is such a big pillar for us, what you'll start to see over the course of the next year is very much campaigns that are built on brand storytelling and purpose. And that's talking about kind of I can send a link afterwards. We just came out with a new campaign that was focused on change of fashion, and really focusing on like what the fashion industry needs to change and how we need to source, you know, better materials instead of, you know, harmful chemicals and harmful materials for the environment. I mean, we actually have a scholarship fund for those that are most tech savvy and more technical, that can turn, you know, pineapple remnants into, you know, garments, and different types of orange peels and things like that, and making materials out of that. So for us, we have very aggressive goals of being very circular. And that's a big thing internally that I think H&M historically hasn't done a good job of telling that story. It's very much the Swedish way to like not brag about what you're working on. But I think as a marketer, it's very important that we tell those stories so that our customer understands them. So, you know, we have our conscious collection line in H&M. You'll start to see every single campaign that we come out with have a sustainability layer to it, so that we're able to speak more candidly about what we're doing and the efforts that we're making. So it's essentially a plan starting from this year all the way out for the next 5 years through 2025. So exciting things to come.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Of course.
Andrea?
Hi, I'm Andrea.
Hey.
I'm also studying fashion marketing and hoping to connect it like with law after. So learning about your life path and reading about you and listening to your podcast was really motivating, seeing that you've done so many things as well. So I'm trying to figure out like my own path of how I'm going to connect it. And a question that I had for you was, when issues like COVID and like these pandemics hit the world, how does that affect like online sales, like for H&M? And then how does that also alter your marketing strategies, since so many people are spending their time online and looking at it constantly?
Right. Really good question. And I think that it was tough, to be honest with you. We had 550 stores close, and you know, with that, nobody prepares you for it, because we went from having this like omni-channel approach to where it was store side and also online, to then stores completely shut off and everything focuses online. So the amount of growth that we had to give to the online team, and how do we convert that store side customer to an online customer, became quite challenging. And I think going back to the earlier point that was asked about, like, how do you keep track of everything? We really, you know, built a close check-in relationship with the online team. And I think that's what's so interesting about being a marketer, right? Because you're kind of at the center or hub of all of the information that you're, you know, gathering and trying to figure out what do you promote and how you promote it and how you have to change your strategy. For us, we completely flipped our media investments, retook a look at them. We met with the online team every single day to take a look at selling patterns, whereas before we met with them weekly. So we started to see that, okay, now that this customer has shifted and they're at home, you know, it doesn't surprise any of us, but H&M Home, which a lot of people didn't even know that we had, was through the roof. People, I mean, I even did it here. You guys are seeing like a nasty view here. I need to redecorate this side, but this side is actually really nice. But, you know, people are redecorating their apartments because they're having to work from home. They're, you know, buying more basics. They need more essentials. They need workout clothes because now they're working out at home. Their kids don't have access, and they're growing, you know, throughout these 3-4 month periods that they need, you know, clothes, because they're getting dirty from being at home. So like, you have to switch your mentality to pay attention to these insights, and you can't market the same way that you used to. So I think you, as a marketer, you always have to have your finger on the pulse to understand what is going on with that, what is going on around you, but also being able to adapt. So we reworked our social media plans, our budgets. It was a lot of work. And then also, how do you combat with we had to have in-store marketing material to tell our customers, you know, sorry, we're closed, and how do we not piss people off? And then some people have to wear a face mask, other states don't. That's a whole other thing. But I think that's the exciting part about marketing. And if you really love it, it's constantly changing, and there's never going to be a rule book that has everything you need to do. You just have to trust in yourself and test and learn, but then, you know, follow the analytics to say, okay, this is working, we should run with it. Or, you know, we're okay to shift entirely to online, and this is how we go about doing it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's what I like about marketing, is that you always are constantly looking at like what's working and what's not working, and how do I change that, and like those collaborations within the team. So that's why it's important to have a good team that everyone gets along with.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Of course. No, you're 100% right on that.
I
It
know.
varies everywhere.
I know.
We call it social intelligence.
Okay, the class is called marketing intelligence. So.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we call it social intelligence. We actually have a team that is based actually in the UK that is responsible for consumer insights, and part of that comes with the reason why that team is called consumer insights is they also do a lot of surveys and focus groups and things like that don't necessarily live on the digital space. And they also dig through a lot of the CRM data, customer relationship management data, to, you know, kind of help draw conclusions and insights on who our customer is or who our target customer is. So I think from that perspective, from a social media side of things, we use a tool called Sprinkler, which Sprinkler allows us to do social listening on our own. We can do that at the campaign level, general brand health level, to really kind of assess what the positive or negative sentiment is. So that's a KPI that we actually track a lot, is, you know, tapping into social conversations to see what the brand perception, brand awareness is, ad recall, etc. So yeah, we're starting to build that out more and more as we are growing our loyalty database to try to drive as much customer information as possible so we can get to know our customer more and market to them in a deeper way.
I appreciate you sharing with our class, but I love how you share with everybody. I think that's really, it's definitely going to come around.
Thank you.
For you. But
thank
you so much.
Of course. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a good evening.
Thanks. Have a good rest of the day.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.